In this video, I'm going to rank every single version of the Scar from worst to best. For the sake of this video, I normally don't do this, but I will be including the Chapter 5 version of this weapon, the Striker AR, because while it does perform differently than, your traditional Scar in the game, they do have the same exact weapon model and are clearly modeled after the same IRL weapon, so normally I would consider them different weapons, but for the sake of this video, to beef up this list a little bit, we're going to include the Striker AR. I mean, look at that weapon model, they're the same. If you do go on to enjoy this video, be sure to leave it a like. Use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop as always. And yeah, we've got some ranking to do. We've got 8 scars to talk about. At my number 8 spot, the worst scar we ever saw in Fortnite history was the Chapter 4 scar. And to be quite honest with you, it was not even close. This is one of the worst assault rifles I have ever used in Fortnite. I'm telling you, they decided to now make the scar, instead of its crazy epic and legendary version, now have common, green, and blue rarities. And that was a terrible decision, right? The scar had all its, aura, for lack of a better word, because it was very rare and just crazy hard hitting, but no, it got crazy nerfs in the common through green version with some of the worst bloom I've ever seen for a Fortnite assault rifle, and there's just no way you can justify taking the Chapter 4 scar over something like the red eye assault rifle that was in the game at the same time. And yeah, like I just said, since the scar was no longer found in Chapter 4 in just purple and legendary and in the low tier rarities as well, that means it had to get a ton of nerfs, and they did. They nerfed the reload speed, they increased hipfire spread, they increased the bloom while aimed down sights, and this is no doubt the worst version of the scar we ever saw. Moving on to number 7 is the suppressed scar. Now, some people I feel like really like the suppressed scar, but I was never a fan of it, and really it was because of that bloom when you fully autoed this weapon. When you tap fired the suppressed scar, this thing was pretty good. I mean, again, you guys know I don't really place that much value on the, suppressor itself. I feel like suppressors in Fortnite aren't really that useful. But again, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, are you taking the suppressed scar or are you taking the regular scar? I think most people would probably say the regular scar for, the more consistent accuracy. And you got to remember, right, for the suppressed scar in that legendary version, you're only doing 33 damage. Whereas remember, with the normal legendary scar, you're going to be doing 35 damage. So with this weapon, you get worse accuracy when fully autoing and you get worse damage per shot. And the trade-off, of course, is the suppressor. But if you're like me and you don't value the suppressor, well then why would you ever take the suppressed scar over the regular scar? The one advantage that it has is that it resets to first shot accuracy literally instantly. So if you tap fire, you can be incredibly accurate, put in some good work still. Like, I'm not saying this is a bad weapon. This is still a decent assault rifle. But in terms of every single version of the scar, I think it's only better than the Chapter 4 one. And number 6 is going to be Chapter 5's Striker assault rifle. And we've kind of got to talk about this one a little bit more because there's a lot going on here. Of course, this isn't your typical version of the scar. It's got a crazy fast fire rate, but again, a lot more recoil and a lot more bloom. And this is a projectile weapon. And, it's really tough to rank Chapter 5 weapons against non-Chapter 5 weapons, right? Because you've got projectile versus non-projectile. But of course, every weapon in Chapter 5 was projectile, so it's not like this weapon was at a significant disadvantage. But yeah, you can see why, ranking Chapter 5 weapons gets a little bit messy, especially because you could put attachments on the Striker assault rifle. And there were a couple attachments I think were really good, right? You get that red dot, so you get the hollow sight, you get the muzzle brake to kind of control that recoil a little bit, chuck a little grip on there. This thing can be really good, but the recoil to me feels just out of control. And yes, while the DPS on this weapon is higher than virtually any other version of the scar at 226, right? Mythic version, which we'll get on later in this video, is even higher. You've got to remember that the DPS for all the Chapter 5 weapons is crazy inflated, right? Because they were projectile weapons. So, of course, DPS takes into account you hitting every single shot back to back to back with projectile weapons. That was almost never happening. What I can say about this weapon, it is certainly so much better than the Nemesis AR. I don't want to argue with you guys in the comment section on that one. The Nemesis AR is booty cheeks compared to the Striker. And again, I kind of feel like this is a weapon that if it came back in a season that wasn't Chapter 5, it would actually be really, really good. Like, if this was a hit scan weapon, I feel like a lot of people would really, really like it. But at the end of the day, it is just the Striker AR, and it's not a crazy, crazy good weapon, although sometimes you can get some crazy damage output with this thing. And a lot of it is that crazy fire rate, right? 8.1 for a fire rate, but a magazine size of only 25. So you see why the accuracy is kind of crazy, and pair that with not a lot of bullets to shoot before you got to reload. You can see why this weapon can be a little bit problematic to use sometimes. Moving on to number 5 is actually just going to be the current version of the Scar that we're seeing in the game. No, this is not the OG version of the Scar. I'm going to rank that one separately, but this is the version of the Scar that, let's say you're playing Chapter 4 Season OG and you find the Scar on the ground. Or let's say the Scar were to come back in Chapter 6, that version of the Scar. All throughout Chapter 1, the Scar was your absolute just demon assault rifle, right? It's just so good, so powerful. And look, yes, while it was the best assault rifle of all time, I would argue all the way through Chapter 1, that would change a little bit with Chapter 2 and going forward, right? Like, I think the Scar has definitely been dethroned as the best assault rifle of all time. If you ask me, right, I'm gonna prefer a Hollow Twister or an MK over the Scar. And a lot of that just comes down to the accuracy, right? While the Scar is just a good all-around weapon, sometimes that bloom can feel really, really inconsistent, whereas if you use a weapon with a scope, you're not gonna feel bloom at all. I don't know, it feels really weird to rank this thing because I think a lot of people live in the past and remember the Scar being the best assault rifle of all time, but as we know, right, that's not the case anymore, nowhere really near the case. But again, that's not to say that this weapon is bad. I mean, you've got a DPS of 200 in the legendary version with 36 damage a shot, right? You're gonna be putting in big time damage. And like, given the loot pool, for the most part, you're probably going to take the Scar unless you've got a better scoped assault rifle. Like I said, like the MK, like the Hollow Twister, like the Striker Burst AR. But for the most part, yeah, this is a great option to take. But you know what? I think I've got to give the edge to Nisha's Striker AR. Of course, this is the Chapter 5 mythic version of the Striker AR. And I know, while I talked a little bit bad about the Striker assault rifle, you got to remember that this weapon fixes a lot of those problems. While yes, it is still projectile, and that is still kind of a glaring issue here, the damage potential here is unbelievable, right? And I know with Chapter 5 weapons, you've got to take DPS with a grain of salt, but 235 is some of the highest we've ever seen for an assault rifle. But the DPS is kind of more accurate here because you've got the red dot sight, which is really going to help you hit those shots. My only real kind of gripe with this weapon is actually the attachments, right? Besides the scope, I feel like they could have put so many better attachments to help this thing, right? You get a speed mag, which I don't think is necessary. I think an extended mag would have worked better here. An angled foregrip, which yes, reduces ADS time, but who really cares about that for an assault rifle, right? Give us a foregrip that's going to reduce recoil, which is what this weapon really needs, and then you throw a suppressor on it, right? Which, like, who cares about suppressors, right? They don't really do anything. If anything, just give me a muzzle brake that's going to reduce my recoil even more. So I feel like, yeah, I can confidently say that if I had the, you know, regular Scar and Nisha Striker AR next to each other, I would actually take Nisha's, especially if they end up bringing this thing back somehow and it being hit scan. I think you could honestly probably switch this spot around with the regular version of Scar, just depends on your preference. Moving inside our top 3, these are 3 elite assault rifles, some of the best of all time. And my number 3 spot is Skye's Scar, of course, from Chapter 2, Season 2. This is the mythic version of the Scar, which honestly, if you told me back in Chapter 1 we'd be getting a mythic, more overpowered version of the Scar, I would tell you you're crazy. But that's exactly what we got, and it is literally just the regular Scar, but better in every single way possible, right? They, one, increase the fire rate and increase the damage, right? That's the thing. If you have a weapon that gets buffed in the damage category and the fire rate category, those are massive buffs. And that leads to this weapon having a DPS of 222. You've got to remember, having a hit scan weapon with a DPS that high is really insane and severely outclasses the regular version of the Scar, which has a DPS of 198 in the legendary version. It's really hard to say anything that is bad about this weapon because there really is nothing besides maybe you could make the argument about bloom, but honestly, that's with literally every single Fortnite weapon. This thing is an absolute behemoth. And this really shouldn't come as a surprise to some of you guys. I think it's beaten out by Ice Spice's rifle. And yeah, it's not I think it's beaten out. It is definitely beaten out because this weapon is an entire reskin of Skye's Scar, but just with better secondary attributes. And what I mean by that, right, is Ice Spice's rifle is a direct copy of Skye's Scar, right? Everyone knows that. They have the exact same statistics, same damage, fire rate, structure damage, DPS, everything across the board is the exact same. But with Ice Spice's rifle, every time you hit a player, you get the pepper effect, right? That a hot chili that's going to make you move faster, and that's a good bonus, right? That's not a negative thing. That's never really going to hurt you. And so for that reason, of course, this weapon just has to be one spot above Skye's Scar for obvious reasons. So yeah, of course, you just copy and paste everything I said about Skye's Scar. This thing's an absolute beast, and apply it to Ice Spice's rifle because they are the exact same weapon. And while this thing is absolutely unbelievable, you'll notice it's not at my number 1 spot today. That's because I think the best version of the Scar is the OG Scar, right? I'm talking about the version of the Scar that was doing 98 damage to the head. That is absolutely unreal. Like, it's kind of unfathomable to think that this thing even existed. It's really just that headshot multiplier that absolutely blows every other Fortnite weapon out of the water, right? 2.5 times on a headshot, right? Of course, it did end up getting nerfed to 2.0 times, or basically just the normal version of the Scar we know today, right? Where you're hitting for 72 on a headshot. Don't forget, there was a time way back in the day, probably before a lot of you guys started playing this game, this thing was doing 39 damage per shot. Of course, they ended up nerfing it down to 37, and then it would get nerfed again to 36 and 35. You guys know how the Scar works. But this thing was just absolutely insane. I mean, watch the gameplay. You just eviscerate players. It's crazy to think about an assault rifle like this with a fire rate like this, being able to almost one-tap somebody that doesn't have any shield. That should never exist, and it really barely exists. It's been changed now for, you know, years and years and years. But the fact that this thing even existed, right, I've got to acknowledge it. I've got to put the OG Scar in its own category, and if there was a weapon like this that existed today, it would literally be called the most overpowered weapon in Fortnite history that has ever existed, and there's no doubt about that. This was the best version of the Scar we ever saw, and unfortunately, it didn't last very long, or fortunately, depending on who you ask. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that quick video. Honestly, I was just scrolling looking for video ideas in my notes app, and I saw this one from a while ago, and I said, you know what? Why don't I just make this video? I think it would be a cool one, maybe kind of a little trip down memory lane for a lot of you guys. So if you did go on to enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, right? We are pushing for 100,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone for me, and I'd absolutely love for you guys to be a part of this Fortnite ranking community. Thank you so much for all the support on the channel recently. It has been absolutely crazy. You guys are absolutely killing it, and yeah, I feel so blessed to be able to do this for you guys. But enough of these sappy stuff. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace.